I caved. I caved. After I said I was going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that this was very important, I've just come to the conclusion that really, rather than being so stubborn, I think what I'm going to do is make this less important. Less important. Now, this is all fine. As you can see, I've cut up into the sky with that distant stuff. You know, you can push your eye a little further back, which I like. I'm going to soften this line, or I'm going to introduce some of these lights back, curling back into the sky a little bit. That's going to help. This road, trail, path, whatever you want to call it, you know, this structure here, no, I'm not happy with it. I don't quite like the shape of this. If I lighten this so that our values, not the color, but the value is the same as the surrounding dirt, that will make this less important. I don't mind this being fairly important. I don't want this down here to be too important. So we work on that. Also, I have this mass of blue. And there was, one of you guys had a thought of, what if I were to go with a darker blue to make this lighter? You know, if I lower the value up here, this becomes weight. It punches down on what I would really like to be, in general, sort of a softish scene as it's going anyway. So I don't want to do that either. I'm going to maintain the feeling of sweep, of motion. Always like motion. It's going to continue to rise up to the left. I know this is a pretty strong line right now, and I'm going to take some of these colors and cut into it to break it up a little bit, be more gradual. So let me just play with that a little bit, and let's see where it takes us. I'm going to use a little bit of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson and a touch of yellow ochre to warm it up. That's not quite going to do it. A little more yellow ochre, a little more alizarin crimson, a little more white. I'll just keep looking at my mixing pile on the palette and looking at the canvas until I figure I've gauged something fairly close in the way of color. Okay, still too purple, which means more alizarin crimson, a little more yellow ochre. I think that's better. I think that's broken now enough. Boy, the more I work on it, the less it's becoming that strong painting that I was originally picturing. It's okay. It's still, you know, I'm still happy with the painting. It's going fine. It's just taking more revisiting than I had originally planned. Okay, I think that's good. Breaks up this strong line. That'll do for the moment. Now let's change. Now let's change our colors a little bit on our palette. And we'll play with this stuff. Actually, maybe what I'll do, grab a different brush. So that I don't have to completely clean out the one that I just played with. Okay, so we'll go back into yellow ochre, raw umber, white. That's too high a value. Reserving the highest values for the end. That's still on the high side. Okay. All right. Still a little on the high side. I'll add a touch of ultramarine blue in there as well. Feathery, feathery, soft edges, soft lines. That brings it back a little bit. I kind of like that. I kind of like that look. Okay. This looks a little bit synthetic, not very natural. Of course, our light now doesn't appear to be coming too strongly from any direction in the painting, except it looks like there's some light catching the tops here, which is fine. Boy, even for a brush painting, my strokes are pretty weak, but as long as it continues to work, and I think so far it is working, I'm not going to worry too much about it. It's kind of silly, you know. Even a little brush like this, a stroke like this, I don't want it ending directly above this. Here it's not so bad, but I kind of try to make sure, try to be conscious of staggering things a little bit as you move along. A weak stroke isn't a big deal, but if you put a strong stroke in the wrong spot, well, that starts to become a little bit bothersome. Okay. All right. No, this is all quite outlined yet, and I don't want those outlines up there. I want that blending to happen a little bit more. So we'll just scumble our way. Down the cloud a little bit here. It looks a little bit dirty, but I think I'd like to keep it purplish. I'd like to keep it backed up. Purplish, or at least lower values. There, that's going to work fine. I don't. A bit of raw umber, a little bit of ultramarine blue. I want it unimportant. Okay, so it's not as purple as down here, but it's still a little bit of what's underneath there will show through, which I think is okay. All right, this is a bit of a lone wolf. Let's work on that. Let's try to improve that a little bit. I'm not using any oil. If this painting had been sitting around for a couple of weeks and I wanted to go back into it, I would add a little bit of linseed oil into it. You know, bearing in mind that old fat over lean rule. You need decent workmanship in your paintings, so. I'm staying away from the edge of the cloud now a little bit. Whoops, that's a bit strong. The brush was a little too heavily loaded. Too heavily loaded. All right. Looks kind of like with a few strokes I'm gaining, and then I put a few strokes in that actually end up I actually ended up fighting against myself. Back up. I'm just going to go ahead and back up. You know, like when somebody's guiding or trying to guide a vehicle into a very tight spot for you, but because of the way they tend to talk, they will say things like, "Okay, go ahead and back up. Thanks. That was nice and clear." Very helpful. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going ahead and I'm backing up. I'm not sure which direction I'm actually going. You know, I guess in a way you're usually making progress, because even if you screw up, if you give it some thought, you'll generally discover what not to do. That's a pretty strong edge there, but in a way I don't mind it, because we're in amongst our stronger stuff. See, so this is bumping up, that's getting pushed back. That's good, I think. Back up again. Another one of those sessions where I really don't have anything to say. I'm playing a little bit, and I'm kind of feeling my way around, you know, kind of doing the intuitive thing. Probably not doing it as in as patient a way as I should, but I would really like to make some progress here. What I'd really like to do is finish this painting today. Too high value, too strong. Back to raw umber, back to ultramarine blue. A hint of white. I don't mind it going off the canvas like this, but I don't want I don't want the highest values really as I go off the canvas. Alright, this has definitely got problems. Maybe because we have such a sweep, maybe I'm asking a bit much for it to curl back on itself, at least in that way. Here, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to... There's not much paint on here, so this will not withdraw very much. And it'll leave enough on that I wouldn't have to paint over it again. But what I'd like to do is maybe go back to some of these colors. I'm going to get a third brush dirty here. And I'm going to squeeze a little more ultramarine blue onto my palette. And I think it looks like we'll use a hint of red sienna. Okay, more or less. More or less trying to match the colors that we have in the background blue. Sort of dirty-ish. That's too high a value. Yes, yes, yes it is. Okay. We don't have to nail it, we just have to approximate it. Okay. Alright, that's a bit of a stray. That's a stray, I don't mind a stray. A bit of a stray is fine. I think. Mostly what I'm trying to do is weaken this. Now you can weaken it by dropping the value. You can weaken it by lowering the chroma. You can also weaken it by putting a little more detail in, breaking it up, breaking up the mass. That's what, I've mentioned this many times. If you put too much detail in an area, the painting becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. You lose that strength of it, right? So that in that case it goes against you. But I'm using that same process to try to help this painting now. Trying to weaken this by putting a little more detail, lower value, lower chroma. And we'll see if it works. We'll just see if it works. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, let's get the extra paint off of this brush now. Let's just very weakly, let's just in a very mild way fade this into the blue that's behind it. Sorry, fade it into the blue that's behind it. I mumble. I do a lot of mumbling. It's mostly because I think I'm talking to myself. Which is odd, because when I'm not on camera, I don't do any talking. At least that's my story. Okay, let me see. I'm certainly making it more ethereal. Is it benefiting the painting? That's really the question, isn't it? I think we're going to get rid of this quite blue color. So that this one thing doesn't seem to be so strong. This one tendril of cloud. Okay. Yes and no. Yes and no. That's really kind of how I feel about it. of course, it's completely plausible that you have crosswinds. That's the sky for you. Lower level winds are very different than intermediate, are very different again than upper level winds. So that's, you know, one of the characteristics of our atmosphere. It's one of the things that allows our clouds to do all kinds of things. And that's why we have this sweep. But now, up higher, I'm starting to do this. This way here, well, you know, visual effects and all that kind of thing. Okay, let me have a little peek at this from a few feet back. Yeah, I had left this guy alone for a day or two and not really looked at it. And when I came down today to look at it, I saw this and it didn't bother me, you know? I think the end of the last video, or I said this has to go. This all has to be dark again and brought back to where I started. But looking at it today, if I, as I said, lighten the value in here and then let this stay a little darker back here, that might bring it together. You know, it just might. In which case, I would not have to repaint all of this, barring, as I mentioned, you know, a few small changes. And it's funny. This is something I'm not used to. Almost every painting that I do, I play all of my cards at one point or another on the painting. I have my highest values, highest chroma in one area or point or something. There's nowhere in this painting that I've done that. And the only place that I can think of that I would want to is now here, okay? But if I go into the more oranges, what already begins to look a bit like a prairie fire, that'll pretty much congeal the look of a prairie fire. So I need to be a little careful about that. I'm still very tempted to put light on these sheds and casting a slash of light across the foreground here. But I wanted to challenge myself and see if I could make it interesting enough without doing that. I may still resort to it, who knows. My goodness, has my plan ever changed from when I first envisioned this painting to what it is now. It's gone in a very different direction. But one thing I can say, and this is the most important thing, so far, every time I've played with it, I believe the painting has been improved. And that's really the key. And if you're willing to move things, if you're willing to allow the painting to, in a way, develop, even though some of the changes may be unintentional, but if you allowed them to develop and to move, and in a way, they're not quite doing their own thing, but you perceive them as doing their own thing sometimes. If you allow it to happen and accept it, okay, the painting's a little different than what I thought it was going to be, but my goodness, I'm still happy with it. I'm really liking this shape now. This is much more interesting than it was. And I'm glad that I've toned down this blue. That blue was just too punchy. Again, you know, a lot of weight on top. I don't want somebody to look at the painting and see, oh, that's laden with power up here. I want somebody to look at the painting and say, oh, look at that. The sky is rising off the ground. It's not oppressing it. This is not a thunderstorm. It's not pushing down on the ground. It's more vaporous. It's more clouds forming and rising off the prairie. All right, let me just get back with the camera. Let's do a little square off again. I think you guys like that. I think it's helpful. Oops. See, we've gone more ethereal, and that is definitely what I wanted. soften that line. You know, we've added a few grayish areas into the blue, so it's broken up a little bit. It's not so staunch. It's not such a staunch blue area anymore. Might need a little fiddling here and there. You know, you see little things like that. I see a horizontal line there. I'll do away with that. At the moment, I'm not going to worry about it. Yeah. As we go, I'm liking it more and more, guys. I would have had this painting done a while back if it weren't for my inability to do much work over the last week or so. Okay, talk to you soon.